Okay,
Yeah. I mean, it's cheaper, but it's.
good afternoon.
I'm gonna get a.
I'm Arthur
Okay,
Marcus, Chair of the Historic Preservation Board, and I'm calling the meeting to order at 5:01 PM. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Bray,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Ms. Mosti,
Here.
Mr. Rosa,
Here.
Mr. Chavon,
Here.
Mr. Taylor,
Here.
Ms.
Oh, no
Walker,
worries.
Here.
and Chair Marcus.
Here.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we're all here.
Wow.
Okay,
Full house.
we're now going to state the pledge of allegiance to the flag. If everyone will stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from last month's meeting? If anyone has any changes, we can entertain the motion now. Otherwise, I'll wait for a motion to approve.
I wasn't at the meeting last month, but I did review the minutes and I just wanted, I don't know, Sherry, you can correct me if this is not a proper place to do it, but I just wanted to understand better why there was a unanimous no as I was reading over the one item. It was just the one house on, I'm waiting for my computer to get charged up, but, the one house on,
So you're talking about the motion to build a 3-story home?
yeah,
Yeah, pretty sure that was unanimous.
right? Okay.
That's the clerk.
Why?
Is there a way to get a review, like just a formal
The
review?
comments.
Yeah,
Did you,
did anyone do a
It's
site visit?
available on YouTube.
No, I understand.
Watch the whole thing.
I didn't watch it on YouTube.
At that.
Okay,
The only thing I can suggest, did you get to watch it maybe?
I need to get to watch it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be the best thing. Okay, no problem.
well, here, has the whole text. of it.
I'll watch it. I'll watch
Hey,
it.
you'll watch it too,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
can take
Thank
a
you.
look there.
That's all.
We still need a motion to approve,
Motion to approve.
seconded by Alan. All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. All persons who wish to speak at the board today must be sworn in. So please stand and raise your right hand and the Assistant City Attorney will swear you in. Thank you. Each member of the public that wishes to speak on any item will have a length of time not to exceed 3 minutes per item. Representatives of association will have 5 minutes. Now we will, since we only have one case on the docket here, certificate of appropriateness for major alterations, case UDPHB 24032. 934 Waverly Road. Are there any, did anybody visit the site or drive by?
Kind of hard to see.
I know. Okay,
Perhaps you want to go around and just have everyone. verbally-
sure.
Richard, I walk by all the time.
Nothing to declare.
Shane?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, to visiting the site or speaking to
Site visit and I spoke with Robert.
is that? No disclosure.
okay.
No disclosure.
Are you still on the property? So we just got the features in that site.
You used to own this property? Okay,
Notice.
no disclosures. Tricia, would you like to give us the presentation?
Sure. I did have some slides to show you, but our IT person has stepped away, so.
Great.
So this item is a certificate of appropriateness for major alteration that includes the elevation of the existing structure to approximately 17 feet 4 inches. That would include a new habitable first floor, a new seawall, a new wood deck, and this is all on a contributing property. It would also include a change in the roofing material from asphalt shingle to standing seam metal. And
Oh, sorry about this. It's gonna fall. I don't know, where it there.
What's that?
a setback waiver. So this property is located in the Sailboat Bend Historic District. It was constructed in 1937 for the Broward County Property Appraiser. It's classified as a contributing property and as frame vernacular in its architectural style. And I'll go through some of the modifications that are requested. There's a few modifications beyond just elevating the structure to include the new first floor. And those modifications would include the modified roof line, the addition of decorative vertical woodwork in the roof gables, creation of some new window openings, modification of existing window openings, and the change in existing roofing material, as mentioned in the title. The best way to take a look at what the proposed changes include to the actual structure are kind of a side-by-side comparison that are included on page 3 of your staff report. So you go back,
That's very helpful.
if you go back, maybe. Yeah. So this is the south elevation and it faces the river. So the main house would be elevated up a little over 17 feet. Include the new habitable first floor, and it would enlarge one of the existing window openings. There's also a modification to an interior staircase, which then results in a modification to the roof line. And then you keep going the next line. This is one of the side elevations, or this is technically the front elevation that faces Waverly Road. So again, you see modifications to the window openings, some additional architectural details, modification to the existing roof line, and then the new first floor. And the next slide, this is one of the side elevations facing the east, which is has a little bit larger setback, so it's a little more visible from the waterway. And again, that's kind of the same situation where the openings are being modified. Roof line from this level is a little less modified, but there's some modifications, addition of the architectural detailing of the gable. And then the next slide. This has slightly less changes. More of a plain facade, but still new window openings on what would be considered the original portion of the structure. And then I think that's the last slide in there. Oh, the next slide. Yeah. So, the modification of a historic property through an addition, typically you'd want to see some sort of differentiation between what is considered historic versus what is the new addition. And in this case, there's no clear identification of what was new or what was old. And there's several modifications to the original structure. They're also, for the purposes of this, they're elevating the historic structure. And there's guidelines included in the National Park Service for how you would elevate a building. And this image is also included in your staff report on page 7. And this is an excerpt from those guidelines that talk about how you would incorporate the elevation of a structure. And this is a real example that the Park Service has pulled out and said that it's not recommended to do the type of treatment to a historic property because it does create a false sense of history of
This is not recommended,
this is not recommended. And this is the practice that they're
right?
proposing as part of this application.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you're done, sorry.
Yeah, I mean. you can ask
Okay.
more.
Oh,
I'll
really?
probably answer this question as I asked it, but I'm assuming, and I shouldn't assume, that this is called an addition rather than a new house. Because you have to, because it's contributing, because otherwise it's new.
Yeah, I mean, the way that it's described in the application is that they would be elevating the
Right.
existing structure.
Okay,
And that's what the request entails. The property itself, the way that it's currently situated on the lot, it doesn't have a lot of setbacks on the south or the west. So the property or the applicant is asking for a waiver to reduce those setbacks. So on the south, it would be from what's required of 25 feet for a property that's on the right of way to 1 foot 8 inches. And on the west side, from what's required on the side setback, from 5 feet to 1 foot 7 inches. Which varies to almost 3 feet in some locations because it's sort of at an angle. Going through the different guidelines for and criteria for requesting a setback waiver, it doesn't really meet that criteria because of the fact that they're not meeting the criteria for doing an addition or elevating a structure when looking at that criteria. So throughout the whole staff report, you'll see with all of the different criteria that's listed, it doesn't meet the criteria. With the requests that are being made. When you get to the section that's concerning the material and design guidelines, it does meet that criteria because they are using materials that are found within that section of the code. So in that area of the staff report, it says that they are meeting the criteria or they're partially meeting it in some cases. And they're also located in an archaeologically significant zone. This property is immediately adjacent to the Rivermont archaeological site. So they would have to conduct an archaeological survey, well, do archaeological monitoring within the locations that they're doing ground disturbing work, any new ground disturbing work. And because they're proposing to do this addition in the same location where the existing footprint is. So the archaeologist wasn't recommending a full survey, but did want to make sure that any archaeological any areas of ground disturbance would be monitored by an archaeologist.
Okay.
So in conclusion, staff finds that the application for a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number UDP-HP 24032, located at 934 Waverly Road, does not meet the criteria as outlined in section 472411 D3CI, partially meets the criteria as outlined in section 472411 D3CII, and partially meets the criteria as outlined in 4717, and partially meets the criteria outlined in section 472411H, which is for the setback request. There's a few conditions that are outlined on page 10 for the board's consideration. The first one is that repairs to the existing structure, including any required replacement wood clapboard siding, must match the existing material, texture, size, etc. And two, that all glass shall be clear with an option of low E coating. 3, that horizontal roller sliding windows may not be located on a front elevation, including windows facing Waverly Road or the new river waterway. 4, that landscaping shall be placed in front of the mechanical equipment, screen it from view and reduce visibility. 5, an archaeological condition that I won't read in depth. And 6, this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements, including landscaping.
Thank you. Okay.
The report, the mechanical equipment, is that what exactly about?
So it's the air condenser.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This example tells us what is unacceptable, so to speak. Is there an example of what is acceptable?
Yeah.
Because I'm just so confused that it seems like whatever you do, you gotta be so far away from it. But if you go away from it, how do you meet the criteria that's being asked for? You're gonna change something. What, I'd like to see it be side to side of what is acceptable
Yeah, so.
in comparison to what is not
There-
occurring.
There is a link to the entire document that the National Park Service has published.
Okay.
That does provide examples that are acceptable.
Okay.
Generally, when you're elevating the structure, you're trying to have that lower portion of the elevation recede behind. So you're not really noticing it as an addition or something different with the structure. Sometimes it's incorporating a different color into the facade, a different texture to the material, landscaping. Stairs are usually required because you're elevating the building, so how you're situating the stairs. And there's different ways that you can accomplish that, but by just simply adding an additional floor isn't the accepted part.
Okay, thank you.
So since that's in the staff report, could we click on that? Is that appropriate?
I'm not sure, I don't have the active link in the slide, but I can send you a link.
Is it in the backup?
Yeah, I
It
can,
would be,
I can-
I mean, I think.
It's in the backup on the website?
but
That'd be helpful for me. Others think it would be helpful.
It's not gonna be as nice a picture. as I can imagine.
On the city website?
Yeah, it is.
Perhaps we should just go around and have everyone ask what, well, first of all, would the client like to get up and speak and make a presentation? Or the architect or whoever's here?
Good evening, my name is Rob Orcutt, the architect for the project. And thank you for hearing this project and reviewing our application. We also have a short presentation slides.
I read on this, you okay? Still not.
You can take it if you want.
Keep it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks. This is the project, this is the property at 934 Waverly. Where we are proposing to raise the structure. The existing structure, which we know is contributing to the Seville Bend Historic District. Go to the next slide again.
This is, give me 1 second, I'm sorry.
Okay. These are images as part of our narrative that we've shared. Of the existing structure, which shows a view from each direction. You can see it's very close to the property line. On the west side, which is the photo that you see down in the bottom right hand side. And as well as close to the rear property line against the river. Which you see on the other left hand bottom side of the photo. On top left is a view from the front. And the top right is a view from the east side. This property is unique. You can go to the next slide, please. This property is unique because of the siding. which we're proposing to preserve up against the waterway. The next slide. You know, as we're all up against high tides, rising seas. This is an image, recent, you know, high tide of the property. That's the seawall that you see just below the water line there. If you can't see it. But that's one reason why we're here today proposing the project. One part is raising the seawall up to the Broward County minimum requirements. With that, raising the structure. Next slide. These are just a few images of that same concern of the seawall height in the high tide. Again, the next slide. This is an image on the west side showing the high tide condition of, you know, just going almost 10 to 12 inches below the bottom of the home. So our goals for the project are to raise the structure in addition to adding the first floor.
What is it supported on now?
So those are piers, which are the foundation. And then, you know, the wood framing.
Over on top of it,
Sits on top of that.
a little
That's-
close to the water.
Exactly. Next slide. This is the project that we're proposing, a view again from the front. This would be Waverly. Next slide. And another view from what we're proposing as the rear along the waterway. Next slide. This is a plan of the existing structure. It shows the condition of where the structure is sited. Next slide shows, you know, the same floor plan we're proposing to, on the top right-hand side of the structure, to add a stair. And then the second floor plan would be directly above the first floor. So our goal for the project was, knowing that the existing structure is non-conforming to the setbacks. ULDR allows us to make additions or modifications to non-conforming structures that don't increase its non-conformity. So that was our goal for the project, as well as maintaining, as you can see from the images in the architecture, maintaining the character of the structure.
What, on the first floor, what is the cave room? Excuse me. On the left, I can't quite read it. Game. Is it game room?
GAM.
No? Oh,
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
game.
Okay. All right,
Ping pong in this case.
I understand.
A question for you.
Yes.
Talk about raising the structure. Could you raise the existing structure?
Definitely. That's, so the part of the project, raise the seawall, and then again, raise the structure. The client came to us with, you know, with the project. And basically, you know, we've run through it, just raising the existing structure, the investment that it takes to raise the structure for one, raise the seawall, and bring the property up to code for flood elevation wasn't a feasible investment. So hence the first floor that we're also proposing to add, so just increase a little bit more to have a usable space beneath. And now becomes a feasible investment for the property owner.
Continue.
Sure. Next slide. And I think we've gone over this, but these are just the existing elevations that demonstrate more so the scale of the structure and its relationship to the property setbacks and the overall and the district's height restriction, which we've drawn in the blue dashed lines, which kind of step back above 22 feet height. Next slide. These again are existing photos of the renderings of the existing structure. Next slide. Here is the proposed structure, raising it maintaining the existing roof framing and modifying the windows, as was mentioned. One portion of the project was, of course, to add a stair to be able to access the second floor. So we've positioned that addition in a way that doesn't increase the non-conforming setbacks. So it's within the setbacks is what we're proposing within the setback requirements. And that portion of the roof is proposed to be modified. We've also located an area where we feel like the existing structure may have been added to or modified at one time, because it has a smaller hip roof on it. If you can go back one slide for us. So that portion where there's a double window just to the left of the blue trellis. There's a smaller hip roof, which doesn't really match exactly the two gable ends of the house. So that's the portion that we propose to add the stair. And then again to the next slide. Which you can see on the bottom of the, sorry, next slide. Where we propose to kind of bring back the gable style and make it, and that's on the top image there, on the right side of the structure. Where we propose to add the stair and change that portion of the roof line back to a gable to kind of match the other elevations. Next slide. Sorry, previous slide. We've also, part of the project is to reconstruct or reconfigure a new trellis that kind of mimics the similar trellis that exists today. And that would be along the front of the property. But these are the window systems that we're proposing. And we've designed everything that, modifications to the structure that would meet the criteria of the district, including the operation of the window systems. We presented that here. Also, the wood siding that exists is now painted a yellow color. We're proposing to reuse that same material and match it as best we can with the new addition. And also maintain the architectural detailing around the windows with flat white trim. You can see that also the white trim on the corners. We're proposing to keep that same character with the structure. And replace the roof with a standing seam metal roof that's also permitted within the district. Next. Part of our request includes the request for appropriateness, as well as a waiver for setbacks. What we're requesting and what the project proposes is increasing height, however, maintaining the height within the district requirements. And then maintaining also the side yard and rear yard setbacks, which are the non-conforming components of the property. While not increasing that non-conforming. The last waiver request, part of the waiver request is has to do with landscape and site triangles on the rear waterway. As the building exists today, it doesn't meet the 10-foot site triangle for landscape, and we're just proposing to maintain that same non-conforming.
My name is Kurt Stain, with actually the homeowner, just to, I guess, kind of share with you a little bit about the journey got us here. We originally purchased a house, then came the king tides, and it was quite a shock to me to see 18 inches of water underneath the house in the whole space. We had it inspected, and obviously there's some rotting wood and so forth that is happening because some of the here, they are actually wooden. And so we began the journey of trying to find contractors that could raise the house. What we found was that the amount of money it cost to raise the house 5 feet to what we would do to basically match it to the seawall, is not a lot more investment to get it to 15 feet. And from the, again, financial investment, where you're not gaining any square footage, try and say to yourself, hey, this is the smart thing to do with your money. So valuable, just, it makes sense. We could make that investment into, basically increasing the cost of the property so much without gaining square footage on it. So Rob and his team came up with the idea of, again, adding the first floor. Didn't know that was possible, but we feel that at that point, you're getting a house that a family can live in, getting a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. That's valuable while still being able to preserve the original structure that was on the river. It does have historical significance, and so that's our intent. And then while you're asking for the approval of the board.
I have a quick question before we go around to the board questions and comments. You kept saying that it's non-conforming because of the setbacks, obviously, because it's so close to the edge of the property. So you have to continue the non-conforming status of the house. Why didn't you just move the house back away from the water so it wouldn't be so susceptible for flooding?
Well, if you do that, you kind of change the historic nature.
Well, you can relocate a historic or contributing structure.
You can, but I mean, at least in my opinion, taking it off of the uniqueness of the property is this right.
Okay.
By moving it 25 feet back or into another lot, the original intent of the design. Again, change it, so that's why we hadn't thought or considered that.
Okay. Thanks. With that, please.
So it mentions roller windows in the staff report, but it doesn't say where those roller windows would be placed.
I did see that in the staff report, and we actually prepared this slide to kind of locate where those roller windows are proposed, and that's gonna be that item number 5. We've tagged each window system with which type is proposed. So we're proposing a roller type window on the first floor, which is the left-hand plan, near the middle of the east elevation.
Is the front elevation on top?
Correct. Up is the front, north is the front.
So the
So
comment
left, right
was,
are the sides.
the rolling windows in the front, I believe, was that it, Tricia?
And visible from the waterway.
Okay,
Yeah, so we're only proposing, we have two proposed roller windows. One is on the west side yard, one is on the east side yard.
that's number 5.
Correct.
Can you tell me exactly what, when you say roller windows, like what you're talking about?
So it's a
Slider, isn't it?
household moving operating window.
It's not a door, it's just a window.
It's what they call sliding windows.
Correct, right, exactly.
Okay. You might want to stand there because I'm sure there'll be
No
questions.
problem.
Okay. Why don't we start with?
Tricia first.
Oh.
Just a general question.
Oh, sure.
In this process where someone owns a home and they want to make a change like this, does the county offer any type of opportunity to talk about what the request is before they make this kind of investment in really researching this dramatic of a change?
Yeah, we have several applicants that, generally reach out to staff prior to submission of an application, but that in this case did not happen.
Okay.
So
So we didn't have an
And-
opportunity to talk with the applicant or the property owner before the application was submitted.
we don't do any kind of workshops or.
We don't necessarily do workshops, but we, are generally responsive to setting up meetings in advance of an application.
So you don't automatically review each report unless the client asks for it?
Yeah, they would have to ask for it before submitting. And we generally,
Okay.
once an application is submitted, then run a timeframe.
Sure,
To get
sure.
everything completed, to prepare it, to bring it to the board.
And then a question for the applicant. So from the way you were just describing not moving the property, you appreciate its historical significance and want to continue that. Did you think about reaching out?
I did actually,
You did?
yeah, right. I'm sure you looked at that back in February with the DOA.
Well, you had met with Bird,
Bird.
and Bird called me in to talk about
That's right.
the people. But it wasn't about the.
Guys, really? Wasn't about this proposal at this stage.
Oh,
It was about the kind
Okay.
of planning of what could be done and what needed, what approval needed to be, who we had to present to, and so forth, to again, raise the house.
okay.
But yeah, it wasn't regarding the specific proposal and in this.
Alan, why don't you continue, since you're
Sure.
right
No,
in the middle?
I like the idea of raising the house. I think it makes a lot of sense. And the contrast between this and what we saw last month where, I think it was last month where we had the willful neglect, like I hate for willful neglect to end up here, but what a pretty house it is.
What
And
about
raising it would make sense to me. That's about as far as I would go. I'd stick with the recommendations of the staff.
Okay,
But I'm looking forward to what I'm sure will be a lively discussion from my
Mhm.
colleagues.
Richard.
I struggle with the idea that we always seem to give someone an example of what not to do, but then we never give them further guidance. I know we're not supposed to on what to do. So we leave it, it's kind of like filing your tax return, right? You just kind of like throw it in there and hope for the best. And it's not ideal. I really don't believe it's ideal. And I've driven past this, walked past this, boated past this house, and the fact that they want to preserve it, I think is amazing. And the fact that we're trying to kind of make it, I think, an overly critical analysis of what I think is not looking to mimic the structure, but is playing off of it, should be given some deference. Like when I go through the height of the elevation, the recommended aspect of it versus the not recommended, there's some important things about this site. To the west of this site is a park, right? So we're sitting on these setbacks, and the setbacks are intriguing to me. Are we allowed to sign off on the setbacks? Does that not go to Board of Adjustment because it's currently non-conforming? Do we just say yes or say no and that works, or is
So-
that?
So because there is an exception provided in that.
Right.
At the bottom of that code section, it
Right.
says that you can apply for a waiver with our board, so we would.
It goes through.
take jurisdiction over that for purposes of the waiver.
Okay, yeah, I've been on this board for a while. I've never been a party to an application like that, but I think considering how unique this site is, the fact that they want to retain it on the current footprint that it's in, the fact that there's no neighboring property to the west, that's really where it's, kind of tight. I would have no issue with the setbacks. In regard to the house, I find it to be a totally beautifully reimagined version of the house. And I can't see how any owner would invest the investment and take the investment into a house like this to not be able to increase its footprint. It would be almost incomprehensible to do that. And then I still think they're keeping it very much in line with what they had, because obviously you could try to say, well, let's increase the footprint bigger. Let's make it a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom. They've really been very mindful, I think, of what they're asking for. And it's tough for me not to give deference where that's the case.
What about retaining the sense of what's historical and what's not?
It more specifically, what do you mean? Like
Well, it's what Tricia said. Typically, when you add on to an historic house,
right,
no matter what you do,
right,
you have to make, according to the national board, you should make the addition different than the original. So people in years to come won't be confused as to what's original and what's not.
I personally find it's doing that with some of the window schedule adjustments, but somehow that's not being perceived to be a benefit. It's being perceived otherwise. So you do see a window schedule adjustment to it, right? The openings are being increased. I think it is distinguishable. I find the new design to be great,
Okay.
so I'm in favor of it.
Shane?
Sherry, would you like to pull up that link that?
Oh, you sent me the link, you sent it, you emailed it to me?
I did, team.
James?
It's the backup, the staff report, page 7, the link at the bottom. There's been questions with answered and, it's now being brought up again.
Page 7,
Okay, I just,
Oh. Did you get the link?
I don't have Teams on here. But I have the backup,
page 7 in this.
You want me to show you which one it is?
let's see. So this one,
It's right here. If you go to these houses, it's right at the bottom.
Keep going,
Page 7 of that.
Keep going, I'm sorry, you're going the right
keep
way.
going.
You'll see.
down,
Yeah,
Yeah,
down,
keep going,
down.
keep going, no, keep going.
Here, page 2, so you have to go to 7. Keep
Keep
going.
going.
It's at the bottom of the page.
Page
Oh.
7.
I see now. So many numbers.
Yeah, here.
There we go. Bottom here.
That's it.
Yep,
Right there.
yep.
Go to page 79.
No, this is a different guideline.
No,
Go
this
back.
is,
No?
These are specific guidelines on adapting properties to flood. So like
Is it this one?
scroll down, keep kind of scrolling a little bit. To like other pages.
See the pictures.
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
go,
any-
go back up to those other images. Yeah, that's what we want to see.
You can go past one story.
Yeah.
So, so this is a picture of a side by side of elevating a property, not as significant of an elevation as what, you know, this property owner is considering. But you hardly notice it. It blends into its environment because of the landscaping. They did add a staircase, but in this sense, it's, they tried to blend it into the existing building. And you can keep going.
And they kept all the existing historic.
Right, they
features.
didn't change the house at all. And in this case, it's just a diagram where they have lattice on the lowest level. And that allows water to flow in and out. If you could go in. And then on the bottom example, you know, they do have maybe some habitable space that they would be providing, but it's differentiated and not repetitive of the architecture found within the historic home. And if you keep going. There's multiple examples within here of what's acceptable, what different practices are. There's whole communities in different cities that have elevated structures and have tailored design guidelines specifically for that. We've only had one other proposal come through that has asked to elevate their historic home, and it's they did follow these guidelines, what they're proposing. If you keep going a little bit. There is one example where they did provide a fully habitable first floor, but used a different material, did not make it repetitive.
With hip.
Yeah. What's that?
Was any of it waterfront? Is if there was any examples of anything that was actually on a waterway?
I'm not sure. You know, we could do a little more research on
But the
that,
guidelines would be the same.
but in any of these cases, people are elevating their properties because of water infiltration through flooding or waterways close by. If you keep going, Jerry.
The other thing with these examples is the footprint of the house is exactly the same, and I do think that there is something to be said for if you're gonna take on the expense of the homeowner to raise it. There is a cost benefit analysis that you have to make of if I'm keeping the exact same footprint, then, you know, there's gotta be it would be hard to financially do that if, as a homeowner.
But you still have to put new structure in, I would think, to support the second floor. Because you're now supporting 2 floors and you're raising it. So
Of course,
that's
of course.
totally different.
But you're getting more square footage, so the value of the home is
Oh,
worth
yeah.
more when you're done versus a one looks like a one bedroom as like existing.
I didn't think what the applicant had said was that the incremental cost to add the floor while you're raising it.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Just to be clear, this is acceptable, like A, B, C, getting to C on the bottom here. Trey, can you go down to 8 feet above historical elevation? That's a textbook example of what
Yeah,
we want to see, or what
I mean,
the
there's-
guidelines
yeah.
say.
That's an option.
you're
Okay.
keeping the house the same.
Yeah, trying to blend in with the environment, not make it stick out. There's one example, I'm trying to find it, that, it was a concrete or stone structure, and they did a full first floor addition, but with, like a smooth stone finish. I think the whole building was rusticated on the top and just made it blend in as though it always existed there in some ways, but differentiated it enough where you knew the upper levels were definitely older than the lower level. And that's the primary objective within doing some sort of an addition or alteration in historic preservation, is that you can see
Speak
that
on,
differentiation.
speak on that one where they did add a second story for a moment.
I don't know these.
You don't know
in and
these,
out,
okay.
So.
I was just noting
yeah.
that was the same case.
Right, and this is, elevating structures is a accepted practice, and it's becoming more accepted through historic preservation. But these guidelines that were issued and published by the National Park Service just a couple of years ago have been incredibly helpful in navigating that.
Well, a difference in siding could be enough, right? So they would look different, keep the same siding on the first and change the siding on the second. Is that-
I mean, I think the idea is that you're not mimicking that, like both levels in these scenarios, you're really differentiating the two. You're not creating a whole new first floor that looks like a traditional house. You would create it in the way that it's subsequent to the main primary historic, which is what you're trying to preserve. And in this proposal, it's really just expanding the existing historic, using the same materials, trying to extrapolate on the same window styles, and you really can't see the difference between historic versus the new.
Right. Richard, did you want to finish?
No, I'm just trying to reconcile all of it. So like, if I'm understanding this correctly, because if you go to one of these pages, they give you very specific points. The first point being, when you construct a higher foundation, the baseline reason is to address the flood risk. Clearly, that's the motivation, it seems, in this application. So am I understanding it correctly that if they took this house and raised it, but instead of proposing what they're proposing, that they did all glass on the bottom, or glass in a way that was like suddenly different, that's more appropriate based on what this is reading, like the way that we're supposed to textually take this away? That if that was, not say clapboard, but like, I'm talking glass, they just glassed out the back, all French doors, let's say, because that's more compatible to the guidelines. Would that be more the aim of the guidelines? Because I'm struggling to understand, like, I think they personally did it great.
I think rather than think of all glass, think of a different window pattern, something to differentiate.
Okay. Or like smooth stucco that then transitions to clapboard.
Exactly, or a different color.
Okay. I think they did a great job. I don't want to sit here and design the house for them, but it seems like when you read into the guidelines, one of the foremost things they address is flood risk. I think it's a clear motivation that the flood risk is the reason why they're here, and to rationalize to just raise the existing footprint is tough. I mean, it's almost impossible. So I'm trying to find ways to, I can read the staff report. It's clear that there's some things that we need to reconcile if we're going to be able to find a way to approve it, but I'm in favor of finding a solution. Seems very
Okay.
tough for a homeowner to,
Shane,
Yeah, I think the proposal looks beautiful as well. I think a couple of things here. One, I think it's refreshing to see an attempt to preserve a historic home. Lately, we've been seeing a lot of applications for demolition. Last month, we saw a house that was like, oh, pretty far, where restoration didn't make sense financially. Now we've got an application where they are trying to preserve it in a way that makes sense financially as well. I think the rationale to increase the footprint. Due to the investment. Is. Very persuasive, I think, let's just restate, last month we sat here wondering how do we encourage people to. Not wait so long until the house is
Right.
falling apart to keep it, and now we've got someone the very next month coming in, trying to do just that. I think with respect to the setbacks, this house is unique, because you go across the swing bridge and you can see it sitting there on the river, and it's something that adds. I think character to the neighborhood, so I would be in favor of the waiver there. And to Richard's point, there's a park next door. So the setback on the west elevation, I think is also fine with me to waive. With respect to the differentiating features and mimicking it. I don't, if I was an applicant, I don't know how you would do that while still having a home that looks presentable. To put stucco on the bottom and wood clapboard. We're gonna paint that second floor a different color. It'd be shocking to me to see a house look like that. And if the concern is to avoid confusion of what this, I think the record keeping in the 21st century is pretty good. We can go back and look and see what this house looks like today versus what it's gonna look like tomorrow. So I think that's a pretty weak argument. I'd be in favor of the application, looking at the suggested conditions. Looks like there's wood clapboard. I'd be in favor of keeping that. 1, 2, obviously, clear glass or low E coating. The roller sliding windows, we heard the architects say that those are on the east and west elevation, so. I believe that they're planning to conform with that. I'm fine with adding the condition of the landscaping in front of the AC. And 5 and 6 are 2 that we always.
Okay.
Excuse me, Kurt, when did you buy this house?
January this year,
What's that?
January of this year.
January this year.
This year, yeah.
It's always.
This one,
Yeah.
on the whole, was next one.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
I asked them.
Okay,
It's not homesteaded as a primary residence. We have the house, we own the house next door to the property as well,
okay.
which is a 2-1 and the 1-1 little subunit behind it. We'd like to see our primary residence.
Sonia?
So I'm not opposed to the setbacks, and if it was whatever was non-conforming before. If it's non-conforming in the same way today, it's not an issue. They're not making it any more non-conforming, so that's good. I think it's an attractive product. I think it still maintains its charm, even from the water, it almost looks like a houseboat. The houseboat kind of feels it's so close to the water, so it's, I mean, charming from the water. Have you all talked to any other neighbors? Have you presented this to any of your,
Yeah,
and were there thoughts?
very supportive. I think we'd like to see the property maintained and preserved.
Has it been vacant, for, before you purchased it, or?
No, it was, as I said, Richard was the previous owner.
Oh, and he was living in the home?
No, he lives on the home on the other side of the park.
Okay,
He was renting his house,
I see, okay.
and then since we acquired it, we've just been, I actually use a lot of the basically like 2 young 3-year-old boys that made it to be my other office very capable. So it's nice and quiet to get over there. Was what we're basically currently doing now. It's not a rental property, it never will be. It's not an investment property, it's for us to utilize. We really enjoy it and want to preserve it.
Okay.
I think it's an attractive property, certainly with the condition, outlined in the staff report. I do understand, and I've seen historic structures that maintain that old structure, and then they have a new modern addition, and it's very clear which one is the new one, but it's not usually up, it's usually like side by side, you know, they're adding on an extra room. So I can't picture how you make it look different going up.
That's up to the architect.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm not gonna come up
We
with.
did explore different variations, but I think like you mentioned that it just doesn't feel right, you know, having this kind of top heavy element that's rested above maybe a stucco or different material.
You could also have different tones of a color.
That's one option, but we just chose to kind of, you know, use the same material. We did place a vertical band around, I don't know if you see the.
Right.
And that could perhaps make delineation for, you know, someone that did want to see exactly where that new and old meet.
So, ready?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. I mean, I like it. I think it's a nice design. I would probably be inclined to approve it.
Ashley,
I think it's a beautiful proposal. I guess I should start with that. I think it's a very nice design and looks good. I'm struggling with this one for just a couple of reasons. I find that a lot of times, you know, I guess I'm struggling because we find this balance of there's flooding. If you don't do something with these properties, then they like demolition by neglect, and then that becomes a problem, and there's clearly flooding issues with this that need to be handled. I also understand that if you're gonna spend the expense to lift it up and do that, that there's also gotta be a little bit of like give with property owner, because, you know, it has to be a finance, like you can't put more into your property than what you can actually get out. You need to be able to put into your property and be able to, you know, make a sound investment. But I also am in a place where this property was purchased this year, like King flooding has been around. It's a new phenomenon, but not a this year phenomenon. And knowing that it was in a historic district and that there are specific pieces that you have to go through. And that they didn't work with the city to try to get it to a different place. I have to say, I think it's beautiful and I love it, and I think it's like, but just thinking through. The purpose here being like the historic preservation board, this one's probably one of the hardest ones that I've seen come through here, because it's not so cut and dry. A lot of times we have somebody that's been living in it forever and they're trying to elevate and get a few variations. This is just a very different circumstance, and so I'm still somewhat undecided on where I would be on this one, because it's just. I can come up with 5 reasons why this proposal should be approved, and I can come up with 5 reasons why it should not be approved, and I think that they're all valid, so I'm still listening and thinking
Good.
through this one.
yeah,
Okay. You make good points, Ashley, but I look at it from the standpoint of. Let's just change the scenario that the owner bought it 10 years ago. What options would he have today? Be it only for 10 years, and he had gone to the city and he had jumped through all the hoops. We'd still be where we are this afternoon, talking about whether or not we can approve this project as it stands. We always run into this challenge that Richard spoke to, which was we can't tell people what to do, but we do have a lot of ammunition to say what you can't do in a way, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, it's just that purpose is to preserve history. Shane's comment of there are other means to maintain and preserve history in today's world than there wasn't when a lot of the guidelines have been set forth. I think I brought this up once before to the church that was being done into a restaurant, that perhaps at one time we talked about a screen there, something for Disney World. We just had a trip right through the past of that beautiful structure, and you could entertain yourself with that while you're waiting for dinner, to see its value and to pass that information on to young people and never lose it. I tend to look at this as this is the best effort that they can make, given the circumstances at hand. First one is safety. The floodplain, it has to come up, it can't stay there because we could preserve it as it is for a window of time, and then the water will ultimately win. So they're being proactive about protecting that and their investment. We go to the next part that you mentioned, which was you're gonna spend the money to lift the house up. How can you justify just lifting it up and leaving it alone and spending that kind of money? It's almost like when you go to buy a new car, you know, I gotta keep throwing money into this car. I'm gonna buy a new one, so. It's a rock and a hard spot for some of us. I tend more to look, I do wish that I'm not an architect. But I'm sitting next to one, and I'm sure we'll hear from him, but I wish there was plan B. That kind of kept more of the personality of that first floor apparent. And gave it just a distinguishing factor between the two. Satisfy registry, but that's also a gray area, because I'll be very frank with you. When I looked at what was acceptable and what was not acceptable, I didn't see that big of a difference, and maybe it's me. Maybe I don't have an eye for it, but I looked at it and I was like, okay. It was like back in what was it? Oh God, I can't remember. Harder than arithmetic. Everybody fails in public school. In any event, I am tending to approve this with these 6 conditions. And I think it sets a bit of a compass for us as we move forward. And what parameters we might start thinking about, we have to work in for everyone who lives in that area. Because we're getting closer all the time when we do this, even though we're kind of not all on the same page, we're doing our job. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. I agree with everyone on the board that I think it's a very attractively designed project. However, I must demur from approving it because I have real great concerns, as Tricia had partly elaborated in the staff report, that it does give a false sense of history. Because there's no, even though you may have it in the records, I'm driving by, how am I to know what's new and what's old? I won't know. Secondly, there's no delineation between the old and the new, the same thing. And it can be subtle. It doesn't have to be stucco and wood. It can be extremely subtle. That's up to you. But I'm concerned that, as well, I just one other quote that Tricia has in here. An addition to a historic building should be subordinate to the historic building and read clearly as an addition. I think that's my biggest concern. Not that it's not attractive, just that you don't know where the new begins or where the old stops. Also, the other concern I have is, let's say in the existing north elevation, where you have 2 windows here in the north, and you have 2 windows there, but they're different sizes. They don't look the same. And some of these, although they're here, they're in a different location. I mean, even if you move it a foot, that changes the historic nature of the project. Which, you know, and I said this, Tricia and I have talked about this before, but I'm sorry it's not mandatory that you meet with her before, because I think a lot of this could have been cleared up before you come to the board, or you might have made decisions based on more information. So that's what I'm concerned about, and I'm an architect, but I'm not proposing any solutions. But I do think that well, I have to say one other thing. I was sort of disappointed in the board because so few people address the historic preservation concerns while addressing everything else. And I don't disagree with everything else, but as Ashley said, we are the Historic Preservation Board, so we need to take that into account. That's it for now. Anyone have anything else to say? Anybody? So Tricia,
I think this is about as clear a contrast as we're gonna see.
what is?
What is proposed and what exists.
That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at preserving this here and then adding here.
Can you
Yeah.
clarify what page that is? just
It's
for-
on page 3 of 10 of the staff
Yeah.
report.
Sorry,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. We do spend a lot of time talking about financial incentives and,
and that's fair enough.
well, I don't know if it is. It seems like we spend a lot of time. I don't even know if we need to go through the exercise. Can't, because we have a learned staff who gives us a report. This one is as clear as can be. And when you go by on the water, you really do see a difference. You might not notice
A
it
difference, what do you mean?
in these two houses.
But one's not standing here.
Right. So I'm envisioning what. it
Oh,
looks like.
okay, I'm sorry.
And I agree with Ashley's point there, like you are a great architect. This is a tremendous design. I love it. And if it was anywhere else. Well, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but anywhere else. That's a beautiful home. But it's in a protected area. You bought that knowing.
I did not buy it knowing. I did not buy it expecting to raise this house. I did not buy it expecting to have 18 inch water in any foundation. To your point earlier about the tides, king tides aren't there yet. So you're only there for 4 days and that happens with 3-4 months a year. I had a discussion with my wife, like, would you still buy it knowing what you know today? I can't say yes, because we had budgeted any amount to renovate it. And what it's gonna cost to do that, even without the first floor, is about 10 times what we were.
Right, it's a
And so it's,
beautiful lot though. There are not many of them.
it is, and it's such an, and the reason that we are extending ourselves financially to protect it, because we love the house, we love the uniqueness of it. And we want to see it preserved, we want to see our kids grow up in it, but we've got to. Many people mentioned, we've got to get some type of, I can't throw $500,000 into something and have the cost of the square foot be the same if I were to sell it for 10, 20 years. So it just doesn't financially work out like that.
If you couldn't expand the square footage, would you go through that, to break now?
I couldn't,
Yeah,
I couldn't, like, you can't raise a seawall without raising a house. And so
Somebody else.
you're in,
Well, if he sells it, if he owns it and he doesn't do it, it just decides that he wants to hold the investment until the water gets to the point where it's not worth preserving, then I don't know that the argument that someone else would do it is fair. I struggle because we sit here every month and say, wow, we wish someone would have decided to do something earlier with this house and save it.
well, I don't think anybody's contesting the fact that they're certainly allowed to raise it and add a second story. I don't think that's the issue here, at least not for me.
And
Yeah, this is where it gets tricky because we're not charged with the responsibility to give designs to people. However, we are charged the responsibility to approve a project as it's presented to us with changes. However, we can't tell them what the changes are. Kind of like telling your neighbor's kid what to do instead of your own. So I have a curious question. Your flood insurance or insurance on your home. Can you even get insurance on that home? And the condition that it's in and where it's at right now?
I do,
And will that change?
Richard, will you take over for a minute?
oh yeah, I mean, I do have insurance on it, it's. Again, astronomical, but it was insurable, I'm sure the insurance would know. What that
Yeah.
was.
You know what? I like this project and I don't disagree with, but I agree with both sides. I just wish that there was greater differentiation, but I don't see how you could achieve that when you lose the roof line of the original home. You're not really raising that home, are you?
That's correct.
You're actually picking it up.
Correct. I draw jacks.
How much how much are you increasing the seawall and the elevation of so from where it currently sits?
Roughly 3 feet.
So the front door of the new house will be 3 feet higher than the front door.
So it's two things. The seawall is required to go up to 5 feet.
Yeah.
It's right around 2 feet right now, so yeah, about 3 feet, the seawall comes up. But the flood zone requires the floor elevation to be at 7.4 because it's a flood zone 6. So the building code requires the floor elevation to be at 7. So the finished floor, the first level will be about 2.5 feet taller than sea. So it's all it all has to kind of come up to meet the flood zone requirements.
So it's like 5 feet. Seawalls being raised 3 feet, but the
Yeah, the foundations. Which will take us through another 10 years and then we'll have to raise it.
Yeah, it's like, you know,
That's supposed to be for 100 years.
I mean, all due respect to both sides of this argument. This is a house that people want to live in. It's not a museum. It has to have the function and the practical application of providing a safe environment for those people who live inside. So that, for me, has to happen with the elevation. And then we get into this other design. How does it meet the National Registry, which is, I guess, you know, that's where we have our debate at this point.
I mean, I can see both sides, but to me, this is historic preservation, they're keeping the same footprint. It's not 100% meeting all the guidelines. But it's also not being turned into a McMansion. It's not one of these new modern boxes that we see. And it's preserving a lot of the green space of the property, which is also important for the neighborhood. So it's not, you can't have everything perfect, that, you know, sometimes good is the end, it's great, perfect is in the end, whatever that, yes.
you said all the time.
So to me, this is historic preservation. Doesn't meet all the guidelines. The way it's.
Is our chair?
He asked me to
Is
just,
she under the table?
no, I think he stepped out. for the restroom. Yeah, it's coming back.
So
It's right here.
does anybody want to do it?
Could I just suggest something before motion?
Sure.
Perhaps you should look at the criteria on page 4 and 5 and maybe go through each side reason or why it means that they not meet the criteria. Because since the staff report is in the record, there's what if you approve it, there should be some reason why you disagree with the criteria within the staff report if you approve it.
You maybe go one by one or?
I suggest it only because it pretty much meets none of the criteria that I've seen here, and it's not my opinion, it's just.
Is that required in the?
Yeah, so in order to approve something, you're supposed to make sure that it meets the criteria, so regardless of his investments and all that other stuff, that's just not in here, except for subsection D on the top of 35, where it says whether or not the denial of the certificate of forgiveness with the tribe within the all reasonable beneficial use of the property. That's something kind of like that, but there's a bunch of other criteria that, you know, we probably should discuss other than some of the personal.
Sure, before we did that, that's a great idea. I just wanted to read into the record that some of the items I'm finding on, like, for example, page 81 of the guidelines on flood adaptation for rehabbing, when we went to the hyperlink. One of the bolded points on here is that establishing a universal standard or measurement for how high any building can be elevated is not possible. So we don't have a diagnostic to that. There is no established number. And furthermore, for buildings within historic districts, directly quoted, elevation should be coordinated to maintain the historic, spatial, and architectural relationships among buildings and character within the district. So let's go through one by one, but I just wanted to read those in as we're pointing to them.
I also like to mention, I don't think it was opened up for public hearing.
Good point.
I can't hear you.
I don't believe you opened up for public hearing, if there's anyone here that.
Yes.
Speak up.
Opening this up. Oh, you're not speaking on this issue, okay. All right, we'll close the public hearing and open it up to the board, so if there's anyone have
So we're gonna go through
Read
part,
four
we're
and
gonna go
five.
piece
Which one?
by piece,
Trish,
yeah.
wanna read that?
what page?
No, we can read it.
What page?
The staff report.
4 and 5 of the staff.
Start with page 4, just to articulate whoever wants to. you know.
Okay. So you want us all to comment or?
Well, only because since it pretty much doesn't meet most of the criteria in there, it's just to articulate for.
Okay.
Those on the side of who are approving it, if that's the majority, just to articulate why you think it meets this criteria, because otherwise, if you say it. In accordance with the staff report, it's actually.
It's too vague,
So
okay.
that's the problem. So this is just.
So who was making the move? Were you making?
I'll make it.
Go ahead.
But you can say in accordance with testimony.
Right, it's just that to clearly articulate why do you think it differentiates other than this investment?
So are we reading this and then explaining our positions on it, then making a motion, or are we making a motion and backing into it?
Just to make the record clear, because
Got it.
the problem is, those who seem to want to approve are
Yeah.
not articulating what the criteria is here for the record, so that's
Okay.
really the problem.
There needs to be more documentation on the record on why this should be approved.
Right,
If
So
people
who's
wanna
reading all
approve it.
this?
I
Well,
mean,
it's changed motion.
I'm still confused as to what,
Well,
what you're
For the
asking.
So
record.
just okay, so just to make it easier, right, the biggest argument that I heard was how it differentiates between old and new.
Right.
So I think the testimony that I heard was that it just didn't feel right, so that's not your criteria,
Well, I heard testimony that said he had. And I'll let the architect correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned this band as being what you thought helped delineate between the two, is that?
That's not enough.
if you believe that and accept that is in accordance with that requirement, then that's what I'm talking about, exactly something like that, and accept that testimony.
Yeah.
What about some of us who wouldn't agree with that?
Exactly, I'm not cutting anybody off. no
Oh, so we're all gonna talk about A, B, C, D, each
Correct.
one.
And
Okay.
feel free to ask Trisha too, if you.
Okay.
Because she's the expert on that, I'm just.
No, I was just saying, I think if there are people that want to approve this, I think it. Stating some pieces that are consistent with what is in the staff report on why you disagree with what staff said. Is what Shari is asking
Right.
for, because the staff report is so. Opposed to the improvement and clear on this, that Shari's basically saying, normally we just read the motion as it's. Proposed at the back, but we really can't, if somebody wants to approve this, you really can't do that, because the staff report is very clear. Then it doesn't meet any of the criteria, so if people have ideas or thoughts or beliefs on why this. Does meet the criteria, it needs to be stated in the record, so that actually a motion could
Because
actually.
legally you need criteria to prove the point.
Thank you, actually.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, so. For A, that testimony. Was what I was going off of, with respect to the addition being subordinate to the existing structure. On the second one,
I'm sorry.
Wait, we were
It's
going,
about the-
yes.
Shane, I'm gonna read the ULDR A, B, C, D, and then
Yeah.
so it'll go in. So the first one under the staff report, page 4, under ULDR section 472411 D3 CI, the effect of the proposed work on the landmark or the property upon which such work is to be done. So the staff's response is indicating that the application doesn't meet the criterion. Shane, if you want to articulate
right,
some points, maybe where it does, and I'll add one or two. Or we'll open it up to the board again. We'll go one by
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, so, is the architect allowed to speak? I don't want to misstate what he was calling this
It's a band.
band.
it's a band.
It's a band.
That delineates between the current historic structure and what would be added to the house on what would be the new first floor. As a clear differentiator between what's original and what's new.
It's that.
Correct.
Subsection.
I would add to that, that if you read response on the last line of paragraph 1, that it states it modifies existing architectural elements in the historic facade, including the following, but then thereafter, under additions, states that they should be a subordinate. I think in the nature of what it's modifying, it is in fact differentiating, because if you look at bullet point 2, addition to the decorative vertical wood board in the roof gable is different than what is currently existing. So
What's different?
that point, I believe that peak on the right side there, if you look at the vertical paneling on that above the 2 windows on the right side, that doesn't exist there, right? I
Okay.
think that's what she's pointing out. So I see a differentiation there that I would just note.
But the issue is, Richard.
That's not the difference.
That's not that's the historic part. So you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to change that portion of the structure.
So the first floor is supposed to remain the same, so they moved the first floor up to the second floor, so that vertical board should not be there.
But it's,
According to historic criteria.
but it's differentiating nonetheless, right? It's
No,
not supposed, yes, it
what's
is.
it differentiating from?
The slat. The slats are vertical there.
But how do you know what's historic and what's not?
It's still differentiating. It's not the same pattern.
How do you know what's historic?
I just see it as differentiating. Maybe I'm incorrect in my position there.
I'm just not following what it's differentiating.
It's, well, if that's the single family residence currently, right?
Yeah,
That is being raised,
right.
right? You're telling me that that position on the roof is not differentiated from that? On that side?
That's not the issue. The
Okay.
issue is the first floor versus the second floor.
Okay.
That's the issue about differentiating.
Eh,
And the historic portion from the non-historic portion.
Okay, I see it as differentiating. Could be wrong.
I just,
Well,
had-
that's just-
Yeah.
I just had an epiphany. Maybe I'm the only one who's kind of this silly. But the second floor of the new design is actually supposed to be the the first floor of the original home.
Right,
It's going on the top
Right.
and the bottom's new, and I was looking at it in complete first time.
Okay.
Although it doesn't change.
So at least I got that out of it, Arthur, okay?
okay, no, I'm,
Flush that to the top.
because I was an electrician.
Okay.
That was-
Yeah. Zoom out.
Yeah, no, I guess I was just saying like that
So,
single story building.
Right.
should, in essence, remain the same.
but then we're in this, then we're in this rhythm of sort of like trying to make it make sense, but then full circling to where it doesn't, because it's not supposed to be different, but then it is supposed to be different. So if we're not supposed to differentiate, but we are supposed to different, I follow, the bottom is supposed to be different.
Word preserve
But
is in there, too.
that's anyway,
You can make your point.
I'll make it
please.
later. I'll let.
Are there other criteria that maybe meet, are there other we have A, B, C, and D, are there other?
No, we're gonna stay with
Well,
one criteria.
going
and
box
go
by
around
box,
the
I
board,
guess.
Go around the table. Right,
So, let's go around the table.
let's stay
Absolutely.
with one. So what I was gonna say was. Richard, I disagree with your definition of differentiating
Too.
because the historic rights,
Suggest
Go ahead.
everybody, there's something wrong with this. First of all,
Well, I guess we'll vote on it.
yeah, we'll vote.
Why don't we delay this for a month?
Well,
that's
we
fair.
need
Yeah,
a
that's fair.
reason to. And let's talk about it for a moment here.
Yeah, sure.
All I'm saying is the historic criteria from Washington says that you should make the new edition different than the old. So that a layman coming up to the building would be able to recognize the difference. The band does differentiate it, yes, but it doesn't make one recognizable from the other. It looks like a well-designed two-story house.
What about the window opening going up and changing? I know
Why-
I realize that's.
I have a
not the
problem with
ideal.
the window sizes are different.
Don't the guidelines also say that different colors will differentiate it, but we don't have any authority over what color someone. picks
We
out.
can suggest it. I mean, as I said, it doesn't have to be yellow and gray.
Yeah, but
It
what
can
I'm
be
saying-
shades of
The
yellow.
point I'm making is if he presented the application with two separate shades, your view might be different. He could come behind the next week and paint it all one color, and this board has
Of
no
course,
authority over
of
that.
course
You don't
it does.
regulate color.
But
So
we
I'm just
can
making
only
the
see
point
what's
that
here.
The
Yeah.
guidelines for the historic registry. You see the point I'm making.
I think this is a unique one in the fact that we're preserving it, right? The idea is that it's being preserved, but it's still having an addition. So you're at this intersection where it's almost impossible to accomplish both, because if you bring this building up, right?
Why?
And
Yeah.
what do you mean, why? It's changing by total form. It's going up 17 feet. in the
Why
air.
is it? I don't understand. I don't understand why it's difficult to differentiate, even if it were.
I'm not saying it's
color.
difficult to differentiate. I'm saying it's difficult to accommodate the fact that I'm not use that word. This building existing as a north elevation is going straight up in the air 17 feet, right? What we're seeing is some roof lines that are changing, right?
right.
What we're seeing are some window openings that are changing,
Right.
right? But it's not changed enough because it's not happening on the first floor. Is that what I'm understanding is the literal interpretation? That the first floor needs to be distinguishable from the second floor and
Yes.
the top floor. So if they came back, let's just say presumably, with that north elevation, the existing north elevation, unchanged, it's going straight up in the air. And all of a sudden the bottom changes a little bit. Does that meet the definition? Just so we're understanding it correctly?
Get back to Tricia.
Yeah, because I was just gonna suggest maybe if Tricia could give examples of how it's differentiated and maybe that will clarify from her perspective.
I mean,
Material, colors, window,
Tricia
placement.
did a great job. The staff
Yeah.
report's very clear.
It is.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think the side by side can really be telling. I mean, if you look at this one, for example, if you were just looking at the first or the original historic structure, they've created a new triple window opening.
Right.
There's a new roof line. There's the detailing that wasn't there. The window sizes are different. It's hard to tell that that is actually preserving the existing historic structure. And then in addition, things are mimicked on the first level, which is the new addition. And if you were just looking at a new addition that was side by side, rather than on top of each other, there'd be a totally different conversation, and it's much easier for you to understand. So in this case, if you differentiated in material, you didn't use the same window size opening so that it doesn't look like, oh, it's the same. There's some differentiation between how the patterns are done. But this happens on every elevation of the structure.
For example, you can tell that the two windows in the yellow elevation are closer together than the two windows in the gray elevation. I know it sounds like a stupid little thing, but that's what makes it historic. I'm gonna say, I just wanted to interrupt you guys for a minute. I was going to agree with Alan. I mean, we've already been talking an hour and a half, and I'm sure we could go another hour and a half. I'm wondering if we shouldn't have the client come back next time.
Application.
The applicant, I'm sorry, the applicant, and address some of the concerns in the conversations. But
Throwing darts in the dark. We're not giving them any guideline to what to come back with. I think wasting
Tricia has.
another 2 hours next month is a waste of time.
Well, we're not allowed to tell them what to do, but
I always do.
can. Let me just throw this out. If the second floor, which is actually the original design, if those two windows on the original home were maintained on the right-hand side and the 6 panels on the left of it were two windows exactly as the same. So we really have held the same personality. Kept the horizontal lines on the second floor of the new building and put vertical lines on the first floor, we would differentiate much more than we have now.
Keep in mind,
And I know I'm not allowed to do
you
that.
can't see this from the street.
You can't see that from the street.
The waterway
You
is
can see that from the
technically
water.
a right of
That's
way.
the front of the house.
That's the front. So I'm just saying, it seems like we're really having a design issue here. And I agree with, Arthur, that we do have our charges to keep the historic preservation and the value of it, but it's a fine line between the two.
Maybe we are keeping the.
So that's my point. To you it is, to him it is.
Preservation. It's just not as apparent as we would like.
Not really. Well, the window locations are different. There's different sizes. That's not keeping it historic.
I also. I'm in the middle here, so I do disagree that we're not keeping any of the design features of the original, because when I look at the side by sides on page 3 of the staff report. I do see a lot of similarities. For instance, the second one down, if you look at the pitch of the roof, like the two little pieces, and you look at the difference in the pitch of the roof, you know, the proposed north elevation.
Mhm.
If you look at the proposed north elevation, those, the difference in the pitch of the, kind of, you know how they have like the two little B's at the top, they do look similar. And they do have, while the exact size of the windows isn't exactly the same, they do have two windows, and down at the bottom, I don't know if it's just this picture, but and maybe it's that arch, they do look bigger. When you look at the east existing elevation, there is, on the yellow one, you have this long flat roof that kind of steps down. On the gray one, the new version, you have this long flat roof that steps down. It is not exactly the same, because you're taking a one-story house and creating a two-story house, and you have to make some adjustments. Also, on the existing east elevation, same thing. You have, on the yellow one, you have a small roof, and then you step up and you go through a long, I mean, those are all elements that are exactly the same between both pieces. Now, it's not 100% the same, but I do think Sonia's point that there are some similarities between the two pieces is absolutely valid, because, and that's part of the reason I've kind of struggled, because I'm looking at the staff report. I do feel like they've done a pretty good job of trying to do it, but it is in conflict with the staff report, and it is in conflict with what the historical guidelines are. But I do think, I mean, I'm just reading the room here, guys, like I'm reading I'll count to 4 here. So I think if there are people on the board that want to approve this application, I don't think everybody needs to comment on every single element, but somebody needs to put in the record. So I think my comments I just made actually go to, I thought it was the element B on 5 of 10 with the additional guidelines and major alterations. I feel like I am claiming how they are not destroyed. Then folks need to go through here and figure out some components to where you can demonstrate what the code says to put into the record, so that Shari has something to hang her hat on if this is happening. If the people that are in support of this don't feel that they can do that or want to do that, then I think we've got to go with what Arthur or Alan is saying and move it and delay to another week, but that's really kind of where we are. Right?
I mean, is that required that we go through every single one of these?
Well, the idea is that you would have to state that it meets all the criteria, right? The problem is that the discussion beforehand was not addressing these criteria.
Mhm.
And the problem is it goes page after page of saying it doesn't meet the criteria, so it's hard for me to argue. If you say in accordance with the staff report, it means that it should be denied.
So
So it's
But
really,
you can say
I
it
think
personally
Richard was-
meets.
I think Richard was trying to go through that, and we kind of got sidetracked a little bit, so Richard, do you want to pick that back up?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't, I'm happy to go through line by line, but as I'm getting more familiar, and I honestly wish I would have had the foresight to look at the flood adaptation section of rehabbing as this all converged, because I'm finding things within the guidelines while not in the staff report that are meaningful. For example, page 87, salvaging and reusing some of the historic materials and features. They're using all wood. I don't know the last application that came in here and said, we're gonna use all wood on our house, we're just gonna go throughout. Everyone has come in and we've approved, everything's synthetic. So I think there's a give and take, and there's been a decent amount of give. I can appreciate what everyone just said about how it's not distinguishable, but there are aspects that are. My feeling as a general discretionary idea here is that here's someone that wants to preserve the house. They want to live in the house. And we're finding ways to say, this doesn't work because it doesn't meet every single aspect of the staff report, where in the past, there's been partials and we've given deference, whereas this one's a little bit more black and white, so I can appreciate that. But you wanna go through line by line? Let's go through line by line. I just, I almost think we have to do it in a roll call fashion unless we don't, if we're gonna be here for another hour at least.
That's why I'm asking you.
For every people, I'm just the
Okay.
person that makes the motion to articulate that.
But do we have to? Because in past motions, we have not.
We've
gone-
cited to discussion.
Exactly.
We've cited
We
to,
just
yeah,
said, we're gonna make a motion to approve.
Right,
Based
right.
on, staff discussion, the staff report and
Correct.
testimony and blah, and we don't go line by line.
No.
So do we have to?
Right, I only said that because of the fact that the discussion beforehand didn't address any of the criteria, and it was talking about his investment, et cetera, and when he bought it and all those things which are not relevant for purposes of this criteria. So I just wanted whoever is making the motion to just clarify, just to make sure you look at this and say, okay, it does meet the criteria based on what facts did you hear indicates that it meets the criteria.
We don't have to satisfy the fact, right?
Yes, you
you
have to
do.
make a finding fact in the 166.033.
Can we make a general reference to discussion and testimony?
Well, the discussion didn't talk about the criteria, that was the problem.
So we
So we
do need
did
to-
talk about subsection D and Ashley talked about B and then you already talked about A. So it's really not much left. It's just to say, hey, does this meet 472411 D3 CII? And just you could summarize why based on the facts, that's all.
So
So which one are we
says that
looking
every
at?
reasonable effort shall be made to provide a compatible use for a property that requires minimal alteration of the building structure, site and its environment. I do believe from what I had talked about, the property, the differences between on page 3 of 10 of the staff report, when we talked about the preservation of some of the roof lines, between existing and on the existing south elevation, I didn't even mention this, there's kind of the long awkward V that exists on both, it was existent on the yellow existing building and it's being transferred to the new building, but the roof lines,
Is it?
I think so. I mean, I genuinely do think so.
I can't
If you
tell.
if you look at the left side, it goes up, it's a short little, and then you have a long, a
Yeah,
short
but there's
little.
nothing on the
pitch.
right side. It's
But on
different.
on the
Similar.
right side, that same exact kind of pitch is existent on the new proposed building.
Not really.
So I would,
And to add to that, I think just saying every reasonable effort, if we heard testimony that said it was unreasonable to make the effort to save it without increasing the square footage. Expense, cost.
We still have to go back to the criteria.
I mean, in reading right here, in elevating a historic structure, it is necessary to understand how the alteration is necessary to increase the height of the structure can be minimized so that historic character is retained.
I think for two, or can I just restate what I think you're saying? You're saying that when they elevated the structure, they did everything to minimize the change to the historic structure.
You owe $20.
So does that, for criteria A, and then I mentioned criteria B. And so we're really on this last page,
You on V?
C and E, I think are the
Okay.
critical ones.
I mean, I think C is the one that I talked about before, the band being the differentiator. Between the elevated portion of the structure and the existing historic structure. That's what I took from the testimony.
And what's the next one?
The next one.
E?
The rest is E. The rest of them partially different.
Think of stylistic features or examples of skilled craftsmanship which characterize a building structure or site shall be treated with conformity. I don't, To me, it has been treated with sensitivity. They've maintained the exact footprint. It looks like very nice craftsmanship.
They haven't maintained the window and the elevation there.
It's not 100%, I agree,
I'm just saying. Yeah,
but they are maintaining historic characteristics of the structure. Not, maybe not all of them, but they're maintaining the same footprint. I think you had left the room, but before,
Yeah.
they could have done something completely different,
oh, yeah.
you know?
They're also maintaining the view in front of on the waterway.
Actually, I couldn't hear what you were saying.
They maintain the view on the waterway. They did not, the historic nature of the positioning of the property on the lot, they intentionally did not change the location of the house because they felt that was part of the historic nature, the architect and the homeowner testified to that, so they took extreme sensitivity to make sure that the positioning of the building maintained that historic feel and the historic nature of what is there existing right now.
And the site itself is staying the same, because the footprint of the property on the site is the same, the site itself, entire piece of parcel. They're maintaining that site.
What's that?
Why didn't you note that?
The fact that it's,
Sensitivity to the site.
I mean, there were a lot of other issues that were more significant. than the Structure itself. That overwhelmed
Mhm.
the application.
Shane, where are you?
Oh, Sherry, is there anything you think we haven't?
That's almost,
Gene's
that's
not-
not, the application does not describe treatment to archaeological resources. Every effort shall be made to protect, so.
Yeah, I think that's one of
We
the
have that
conditions.
criteria or one of the conditions, I think it's condition number, the last one.
I'm good.
All right, I'll make a motion so we can move on. Motion to approve the resolution for a certificate of appropriateness for major alteration under case number UDP HP 24032, located at 934 Waverly Road. Based on the findings of facts and testimony we heard today. And the following, and subject to the following conditions. One, that repairs to the existing structure, including any required replacement, wood, clapboard, siding must match the existing in material, texture, size, etc. 2, all glass shall be clear with an option of low E coating. 3, horizontal roller sliding windows may not be located on the east and west elevation. Or excuse me, let me restate that, may not be located on the north and south elevation, so Waverly Road and New River. 4, landscaping shall be placed in front of the mechanical equipment to screen it from view and reduce visibility. 5, properties located in archaeological significant zone. And so,
If you want, you could just say items 1 through 6.
yes, 1 through 6, except for on number 6, I think. We are, or in this motion, I would approve the setbacks, so to the extent that the setbacks aren't. Within the zoning and ULPR requirements, be excluded from that.
I second.
Discussion.
Discussion?
Just kidding.
Oh, well, before we vote, I just wanted to say something. Despite the good intentions here, and I understand that, I still don't feel like we've answered the architectural and historic criteria that Tricia has raised. Because we're talking about different things like the footprint is the same. That's not a problem. The problem was whether it looks historic, whether you can tell the difference between historic. And honestly, if you walked up to that house with the band, which one would you think looks historic?
I mean, I'm not gonna get back in.
I know, I know.
think we should-
Anyway, I'm just saying I have to vote against this. Not because I disagree with the the intent of the project and what you're doing, but I think with very minor things to address some of the concerns that Tricia has raised, you could resolve this very easily. I don't think it's an expensive or difficult thing to conform with some of the criteria. That's all. And I also just, I hope, I know I keep bringing you back to the fact that this is a historic preservation board, but we tend to forget that sometimes.
I don't think we tend to forget it.
Well, we get off on tangents.
All right, let's vote on the
Yeah,
motion, guys.
all in favor? Well, we're gonna do a red voice vote.
I think I better go for you. Where's Mr. Bray?
He's abstaining
recused.
from this.
Oh, okay.
Accused himself.
Mr. Jones,
No,
Ms. Musty,
Yeah.
Mr. Rosa,
Yes.
Mr. Chavon,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Walker.
No.
And Chair Marcus,
No,
pass 4-3.
congratulations. Good luck. Good luck. That's what.
Can I make a comment? Of course. Arthur makes a good point, but at the expense of this application, slowing his progress down, I'm gonna reiterate what I said before. We learned with every one of these requests how important it is for us to try to, I don't want to say reinvent the wheel, but so much progress has been made. And 100% of the effort goes to Tricia and her staff and listening and teaching us, you know, what parameters we're supposed to be working in. We're trying to carve something out here that's practical and appropriate and achievable. Achievable being a really important word, and it does involve money now. That's a practical matter, is if we want to preserve homes, somebody's got to pay for it. We've got to make it possible.
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but-
don't disagree, but you won't
you know,
find money in our guidance, like.
No.
What we do is.
No, but it still can't be, it can't be ignored. We just can't look at somebody and say, you know, why don't you do it this way, or why don't you do it that way, when one way costs 3 times as much as the other. It's just, you know, this home, for instance, is a perfect example of your comment was so correct. There probably is a simple way to make it right. Maybe if they did get started earlier, they
Right.
would have got to that, but that's a lot of ifs. And they're here today. And their time and their effort is about as close and as good as it's gonna get, in my particular view, and that's why I voted yes.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to stall this and have them come back 2 or 3 times, just continue to get no. And get lost in the bureaucracy of what we're trying to find too, that's.
And I have one comment. Tricia, I know we've had this discussion once a while ago, a year or two. This is a prime example in my mind of why every client should review what they're presenting with you before they come here. But this could have all been prevented. So how do we, I don't know if everyone thinks the same way,
Yeah.
but how do we make a motion to help you get that to happen?
If I could, so
Please.
there's case law that indicates that applicants, developers, property owners, they cannot rely on what staff tells them. Actually, Tricia could tell them anything, and if they rely on it, they can go and
Yeah, but
actually revoke their building.
This is
permit.
the only city I've ever heard of that doesn't do that.
Right, but the problem is, the case law is very strong on that, where, it's not staff's obligation or anything like that to give them any sort of advice, but even so, even if they rely on it and it's wrong, they won't win. So it's, something that I strongly recommend against, because it places the burden on staff to be, I guess.
You know, but if you go to any other city, they will tell you, staff is going to tell you how to adhere to the code. You don't have to listen to them because the board can always overrule them. So, and I know what you're saying, but wouldn't we save a lot of heartache by doing that and time?
Not necessarily, because the applicant chose not to comply with what. according
Well,
to
they
statute,
didn't
not to
know.
comply with
They
code.
didn't know.
They know what the code is. It's
That's
just,
fair.
you have to actually respond in your application to the code.
I don't think the architect was versed in historic preservation.
They don't
enough.
have to be versed though.
Yes, they
They're-
do.
No, they don't. To present an application, they should be, but I've worked with Tricia, submitted an application on behalf of my own project before I sat on the board. But Tricia could not be more accommodating. She's
Okay.
one of the most accommodating
That's
people in
what
the
I'm
city,
saying.
but we can't enforce anyone to do that before they get here. That's up to them. It's a wise move, but it should, I don't know how we would mandate it, nor should we. You know, the resource is there. Tricia's made herself available by far. And-
But I,
But,
okay,
but I
I
don't
understand.
think we can reasonably say. you
Other,
must
other
go to-
municipalities do.
Let them do that. We don't have it
Do
codified.
Something with architects or developers that you list with the city as being versed in historic preservation so that they can go to those and select architects. that
Gotta be
have
the worst
knowledge of our
architects.
stuff, you
So
know.
we're not allowed under the Constitution to assist.
Yeah.
With their private businesses or anything like that.
But it's a registration, what I'm suggesting is that you register with the city that would have been.
It takes a account what the criteria is, they get a certificate.
Yeah, it would be like we were advocating for one person to use over the other, and that's pushing someone's business and their pockets versus other people. So we have to be neutral and not get into all that. But what I would suggest is I could send out the case for you all to see what I'm talking about. You could read it for yourself if you like. But we're not supposed to advocate for people relying on that.
I believe your word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, for the first 10 years I lived in South Bend, the Civic Association had a board or chair that did things with reviewing projects
Review.
before they came to the
Right.
board. That
Smart.
hasn't happened for a while, so that's suggesting an outside source like. the Civic
Obviously, they
Association or
never
something
did,
else.
did they?
Yeah, because they don't do, the Civic Association doesn't do it.
And they would have to request it, wouldn't they?
Look, it was unsolicited, so it was
Okay.
kind of like, it's a suggestion to
Right.
anybody who's doing a proposal before the Historic Preservation Board to have a discussion with the community association, their insights or their guidance on this.
Well, I'm surprised the architect didn't know that he could ask you.
Well, when they submitted their application, we do provide a review of the application for completeness. And at that time,
That's too late.
it is very late, but at that time, within their response letter, we let them know, I provided them with a link to the National Park Service guidelines. I provided them an overall comment about the criteria for new additions, criteria in our code, and I strongly encourage them to come and meet with staff before we submit it. They resubmitted anyway, and then came to the
Well,
board.
then you did everything we
So
could.
that's all we
yeah.
can do is just
Okay.
encourage it. We are here for anyone that wants to talk through their project. And address.
And that was another reason why I couldn't approve it.
There's also a lot of, I think with the guidelines and even like, there's a lot. There's a lot of subjective.
That's why you hire an architect.
What they see, but I think that architects, I think that different people see different things and. You know, I think that architect generally believed that he was preserving the historic nature of that building. I mean, not everybody on this board agreed. Some people did, and that's okay, but I think it just, to me, illustrates there's a lot of difference and this stuff is not black and white and if it was, you would have so much lively discussion at the board.
True.
Well, I think part of this is quasi judicial, so the fact that we have guidelines that don't apply to every single scenario. There's a lot of flexibility in it that we have to sort through to figure out what's the most appropriate situation to go through.
Well, if you have an architect who's trained in historic preservation, they will know this.
So might I suggest we move to the next?
Yeah.
one?
Because we have one more time. So next we have, anybody have, what's the, I'm sorry, the 934 staff report? Oh, no, we just did that, I'm sorry. Communication for the good to the city commission. Anyone have anything? If not, we'll move right to for the good of the city, planning and zoning issues related to historic preservation.
This was a topic that was approved for discussion by the board at the last meeting, that was brought up by Richard Gray. And I did put together just a couple of slides to start the conversation based on what I understood the conversation would be about. So the slide that's on the screen now is just a photo of a map that we have in our office, which is the 1955 zoning. For the city. So the zoning is more or less the same that you find today, with the residential in the center is R3, which gives you a little bit more flexibility in the amount of units that you'd be able to provide in those areas, with the density being slightly higher. And then along the riverfront, kind of, it's hard to see, but it says R1, and it's white. It is more of a single family zoning that still remains today. And then along Broward, it's business district. So there's a couple different business districts, but today it's mostly B1, or there's a couple of areas where it's like community facility, like the area in blue, which is where the police station is. And that was all owned by the county at one point. So it hasn't changed much substantially. The verbiage has changed in the descriptions and whatnot, but other than that. And then as we switch slides, people, can you advance the next slide? And then this is today's map. So you kind of see the same pattern, more or less. The browns are the multifamily residential areas, still have blue as community facility. And then the yellow is the single family zoning. And then the next slide. And then this is just the different zoning district descriptions that are found within the area. So multiple residential descriptions. We have boulevard business, community facility. And then we have one planned unit development, which is the Sailboat Bend Village, or the Village of Sailboat Bend, and then several park spaces. And the next slide. And then I just broke down the permitted uses versus the conditional uses on the residential zoning districts only. I didn't go further into the other areas as far as what's permitted by right. You can have single family, you can have all sorts of multifamily. You can have community residences by right, and then for a conditional use, you can have different types of uses. So you can have a bed and breakfast, you can have a mixed use development, you can have a hotel, but you do have to go through an additional process for that. In the next slide. And these are just a few additional uses that are allowed within those zoning districts that are identified as residential. So a couple of conditional uses that are in addition here with social services and schools and churches and daycare and nursing facilities. And the next slide. And then just so you're aware, there's criteria that goes along with requesting conditional use. If someone wanted to come through that process and they have to meet the criteria that's outlined for them here. So that relates to the improvements that are needed. They also would have to meet the parking and roadway requirements and traffic. We would want to take a look at, how, what kind of use it is and how that's facilitated through the property, like waste management. And the like, and how it's compatible within its surroundings. And then the next slide. And so this is a lot, I think, but just the process of how you submit an application for a request for conditional use. On the left-hand side is kind of just this middle process where you're coming in to submit your application. We have a staff review meeting for DRC is where it would start. And they would give comments back. Then the applicant would go through a back and forth with staff to resolve the comments. Part of those comments, if it was a property within the historic district, would be come to the Historic Preservation Board. And then ultimately for a conditional use request, they would have to go through the planning and zoning board for their final approval. And that was the last slide, but just to kind of give a broad overview of what's happening planning, zoning wise, within the Sailboat Bend area specifically.
You show that to prospective applicants coming in?
We have this available, something similar on our website and in all of our applications.
Oh,
We have
because it's a little daunting, I think, for a land. But it's a good chart.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot going on. So depending on your, you fill out an application and as part of that application form, there's a flow chart that goes along with it for most of our processes.
So is it possible for a developer to come to you and say, I want to build a hotel and sell boat land?
They are
And
permitted.
where could they possibly do that? Is there room to do that?
So along Broward,
Just the applicating.
Yeah.
County site?
House, that's.
Oh, Broward Boulevard.
It's possible.
Oh, yeah, you did a 40-story building there if they wanted to approve it.
And that would
I mean,
have
if
to-
the-
that would be a hell of a meeting.
There's a lot of
Would we be
consideration.
picking out the carpet?
You wanna leave it?
No.
One Broward Center, I think, something like that, was actually approved in the seventh district, not the historic district, that was the Christian built at one point. That was 40 some odd, still almost 50, I think. So that still might go up.
Where
Right there,
was-
Broward Boulevard. In Hemmershey, yeah, but it's still separate.
Along Broward, you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense, but still, it's a little close. Why can't
No,
you
all
have,
those things are possible.
can't you have the zoning changed as a neighborhood?
That's what we're here discussing, some of this
Yeah,
potential
I
zoning
don't
things
think-
for historic preservation.
anyway, that's not what we're here for. I digress.
I have a question for Shed. There's a business improvements district on the beach. And it funds, and pays for its own. Upkeep and maintenance and things like that, because there isn't enough money coming from the city. So they chose to do that. Is there such an application for that in a historic district? To have their own self-imposed tax on the people who live there to provide funding for the maintenance and upkeep and preservation of their common cause.
Well, we have to look at what the special district requires, but we can do it, it just depends on what the purpose of the special.
Because we're always trying to find ways to strengthen their, their preservation of their properties. And if they felt that strongly about it, they would do something similar to that. Perhaps that would be a way when someone purchases a home, sells a home, whatever, there's some sort of impact fee that goes into that, that continues to provide support financially. Maybe it sounds too simple, but I know on the beach, these hotels throw tons of money in. And they have a private company that comes out and cleans the streets, picks up trash, sometimes security people who deal with the homeless, but it's over and above what the city has. Provided.
I think there's a key differentiator there, between a bunch of hotels versus a bunch of.
Yeah, property
Residences.
owners, yeah, I understood, and I know that the budget's probably the same and the resources are less, but I'm just trying to find ways to.
This is not a matter of voting on, so I can tell you, I live there and I don't want to be paying any more.
There you go,
tax.
there you
Yeah.
go, good answer.
But the requirements are expensive for the homeowners to keep it. You probably want to open it up.
Public input.
Okay,
If you want.
can we open it up to the public?
I mean, I'll just. Maggie Constable, Ben, and I'll.
Please introduce yourself. Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'll just say that, the requirements for what kind of windows you use and everything, it's much more expensive for us in historic district than it is for anybody in the rest of the city. And we're looking for incentives to help us with those expenses, not to add on. So that would go over like.
Well, that would be. My second suggestion would have been, if a hotelier did build in that area, there would be an impact fee for him to offset some of that cost and be spread to the community center.
So now when we get to the zoning part, I have some input. I was going to be ready for that.
Okay, I'll say it now, yeah.
Okay, so I love that you guys are doing some discussion to come up with some ways to rezone and in the city association, we kind of. We're doing that also, and I think it would be great to get the consulting firm and doing the business plan. There's a vision plan and a report coming out in November, and that's to prepare to suggest for whether or not a master plan is feasible, which costs a lot of money, right?
So, you know, I'm assuming since you're on this board, you love historic buildings and travel and read, and so you'll have a lot of great suggestions for adaptive reuse and all of this. But I would like to emphasize the point that I think at this point, if we're going to give a communication to somebody, at this point, it should be with a consulting firm. And especially down the road, because the Central Bend Civic Association Master Planning Committee is officially asking you, we voted on this, to not send any communication on rezoning to the city commission at this particular time. If you were sending it to the city now, then you are recommending zoning without the consulting firm that the city has hired for a vision plan and will hire for a master plan. The consulting firm does it as a full-time profession. And when the city is paying for their expertise in this area, it doesn't make sense for us who are not professionals in urban planning to try to do it instead. But to work with the consulting firm instead, so to put your communications, if that's legal, to, if you can legally do that, to give that, and you can do that as individuals to the consulting firm, because everybody should have input, and you guys, especially this being your area, should have. We welcome that input. But then down the line, when they do this more expensive master plan, the city commission is going to vote on it. And then that would be the time to send your. Thank you.
Anyone else on the board?
Just out of curiosity, the master plan comes out, then the city commission votes on the approval of the budget line item to then pay for it?
As Tricia.
I didn't quite,
Master plan comes out,
I-
or-
well, to Maggie's point, Maggie, do you mind coming up for just
So-
one minute?
I mean, right now, we just have funding for a vision plan.
Correct, right, that's it,
Period.
right.
And
so
who does, the
that's what I thought-
consultant
that's what I
does the
thought.
vision plan?
What's that?
The consultant does the vision plan?
Yes,
So this vision plan is produced, it shows certain zoning suggestions, is what I'm understanding?
I'm not
I
sure
didn't know
what
that.
the ultimate result will be at this point. We had an open house a couple of weeks ago and received a lot of different feedback.
Mhm.
And there were different categories that the consultant had kind of divided the discussion into. So
Right.
part of it was regarding flooding in the neighborhood and resolving some issues related to that. Part of it is related to park and the open space. There's been a lot of feedback regarding that. There were discussions about that. There was kind of an open station where people could provide just general comments. And then there was an area where they set up this kind of like planned development that we know is going on, like the PlayStation site, the adjacent site next door. And then the Broward Addiction Recovery Center site.
Yeah.
Currently being utilized as a staging area.
Curious to that last point, what was the feedback on that center specifically?
So we got a lot of information,
Yeah.
and right now the consultant is just sorting through everything.
Got it.
Because we had a lot of different ways to provide feedback at
Yeah.
that event. I'll be sending you all a link to a survey that you can fill out if you'd like to participate. In that, we just finished that up, so it's available on the website. I'll send you guys a direct link, probably tomorrow.
So what are we looking to do on this issue now?
So this was a topic that Mr. Bray had
Right.
raised last time, and it's could potentially be part of what the consultant is looking at, but it just depends on what kind of feedback was collectively heard. And then the intent of the vision plan is to try to prioritize the objectives of the neighborhood. So then does it move forward into a master plan at some point? I don't know. I can't really say that with certainty.
Sure.
But we will be asking for that. And this is the precursor to it. You can't do that without the vision. plan.
Right.
This is the step. And the other thing, Andrew, the guy from the consulting firm, did say that he probably wouldn't be addressing specific zoning things in the vision plan, because that's not what you do. You just kind of generalize. But that would be part of the master plan. And I hate to see this board competing with the consulting.
No, we don't want to do that.
Work with them.
Yeah. So this consultant will not make any planning and zoning recommendations as part of his overall look at the neighborhood?
They're probably not going
Okay.
to be too specific as far as, like, this area should be zoned differently, or.
So how does the neighborhood give a sense of what may be beneficial or what's not beneficial? Maggie?
In the master plan, because that's where the higher dollar is, where they can really take the hours that cost a lot to discover this, and then they'll be.
Tricia just said they won't do that.
This is the vision,
Okay, sorry, not the master.
but when the
Yes,
big master plan comes, he definitely.
okay.
So can I just restate it to make sure I have it right? Consultant's doing a vision plan. City's commission's gonna vote on whether or not to go forward with the master plan based on the vision plan, is that right?
Well, it's the precursor. I mean, nothing will happen unless somebody asks for a master plan, but we're going to ask for it, and you have to have this
Need the
done.
vision plan first.
And who would do the master plan?
Well, the city would pick out, but I wouldn't be
So
surprised.
it'd be a different firm, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
although I have to say, this
Yeah.
firm probably, I mean, it looks good to me because they've done historic districts all over the world.
Who's the firm?
It's Dover Full.
Oh, they're great.
Last
They are
month,
great.
We had the consultant join us.
They're one of the best.
So, what's that?
By Zoom.
Yeah, she joined us by Zoom just to announce.
Right, I remember
the
that.
house And the project.
Yeah.
But there's a procurement process for hiring any.
They put out a bid. RFP, city will put it out.
Okay,
I just wonder where like planning and zoning would change so dramatically, because if it's not gonna, we presume it's not gonna increase density.
what about along Broward?
Yeah, well, Broward's a B1 zoning right now.
But instead of 40-story buildings, you may want to look at that.
Well, I was just raising it for discussion, guys. So-
Yeah.
No, we're just.
And with the key thing often is that there's this 20% tax break that's only for income producing properties. And so there's a lot of hoops you need to jump through for all of these other things in order to get approval for adaptive reuse or for the 20% tax break for income producing properties. And so it's almost to me like that's one of the main ways that property owners can see the vision for retaining the property, the historic value of the property, and using it for their personal use, if it's for an office at home, like Kirk was doing with his property for a while, or that it's for boutique shop or a coffee shop or something like that on a smaller scale in a boutique district, rather than it just being all these properties being torn down or just used for residential use. So it's an option for property owners to say, automatically, if I'm a contributing property or historic property in the city of Fort Lauderdale, you automatically have that mixed use option to receive that 20% tax break, rather than going through this whole onerous process of getting it moved from residential to mixed use or commercial use.
The mixed use, oh, sorry, Tim, go ahead.
It's not looking to change the property
Sure.
because in order to get that benefit, you still have to retain that contributing
So that's 20.
factor of it.
Is that an arbitrary number that you just came up
No,
with, or?
That's one of the benefits for income producing properties.
And is it 20% of your total bill or 20% of certain parts of it?
That's,
Well, I wanted to clarify, is this, the, like, where's the 20% coming from? Because in the city, we have 50% reduction, and in the county, there's a 50% reduction.
there might be more there, but I think federally, you have an option for 20% reduction in tax returns. If it's
So we don't,
Rehabilitation tax credit that I don't think they apply right to us.
yeah.
No,
it's
that's
a
private.
Completely separate
You don't
process.
have to be an income producing property in order to receive that. So
It also has
unless
to
you
be-
allow property owners to do it, then there's no way of getting it.
You also need to be on the national register to take advantage of it.
But the civil and historic district is.
No.
No,
Isn't it just in the city?
yeah, that's a local.
Well, it's a
stuff.
county too.
What's,
So it
Civil
has
and
to be-
historic district is the county.
It had, my understanding is it has to be individually listed on the national register.
Right.
To qualify for that 20% tax credit, at least that's what the federal website says, so.
but in the city, we do have a 50% reduction for properties that are designated as individual historic areas or contributing property within a historic district that's locally designated. And that's 50% off your base taxes. That's not including the school board or fire districts or anything like that. The county also offers the same reduction on their side of the taxes too, and their base.
But when you do the calculation, I mean, this is where it's, for me, it was
Yeah.
misleading. When I was being considered
Right,
to
it-
become
it-
historical, 20% is not 20% of your total property tax. When you write a check and you write a check for $25,000 and somebody says, but you'll save 20%, you take 20% of 25,000, then you read the small print. And you start saying, well, it doesn't include this amount, that amount, this amount. Now your 25,000 goes to 10,000, you get 20% of 10,000, which is 2,000.
Well,
Yeah,
it's 50%
that's
of
per
your
year.
value, basically,
Okay,
is what it
but
is, and then
it's
that
it's just a bit,
reduces
that's why
your
I
tax.
asked if it was a real number or this,
Yeah.
but it's a great idea. And again, it's just something that needs to be kind of like put out there and be some crystal clear, so everybody knows whether they're getting an automatic or a stick when you buy the car. That's it.
Just to add, there's also another way if you find that your property, the feds find that your property is contributing, it's possible in your district. In addition to individually.
I like the idea for businesses to get a big incentive like that. It's a great idea. And then if you have income coming in a building that needs to be preserved historically, and it's not a residential building, and it doesn't, the only income it has is maybe some folks that worked all their life and they're retired now and getting social security and their pension, rather than have a boutique or a shop that's turning a profit every year. They can keep that place alive, and it takes money.
Just to have it declared historic, 6 months.
Yes, and it takes more money to keep it that way. It's like getting married, Art.
Okay.
In addition to that, there were other ways that the city has, such as the CRA, that I mentioned before, but it's trying to get other funding to improve the area for historic preservation, because if you move from Broward Boulevard all the way further south to the river to incorporate some of those things, you might be able to get funding for the seawalls or for drainage or for striped sidewalks or for streetlights. All those things that would bring more of an appeal for both residents and for tourists, other people living in the city, to come into the district and really feel like they have some pride in the historic preservation for the city of Fort Lauderdale. So there's that, and there's a river walk, you can extend that. There's various different districts that already exist that you could extend or improve so that incorporate some of this area that would help that area kind of have more of an appeal or aesthetic appeal for that. The city park has a broken seawall. They have a broken sidewall that leads onto his property. So all the water from the river seeps through the seawall up onto the land and into his property because it doesn't have any barriers. So his house was getting flooded. So again, the city doesn't have funding for that. How do you get funding from that? You expand it in other ways, like the CRA or the Riverwalk or the creating a new one, as we just talked about.
I thought the
Cultural
seawall,
Heritage District.
I thought the seawall was the owner's responsibility.
He's saying.
Yeah.
I'd like to-
City Park, adjacent properties owned by the city.
Oh, yeah,
Water goes to the lowest point.
of
so-
course, of course.
Under 163, 360, you have to find by resolution that area wherever it is you would like the CRA to go is a blighted area. It's not blighted.
Well, that's
Um,
why we have sidewalks, and it doesn't have a lot of things that some of the other cities have.
Is it a swamp area?
What's the definition?
Is that
of
defined by
bio-
median income? How's that defined, Shari?
This is, it says, community redevelopment in a community redevelopment area shall not be planned or initiated unless the governing body by resolution has determined such area will be a slum area, blighted area, or an area in which there is a shortage of housing affordable to residents of low or moderate income, including elderly, or a combination thereof, and designate such areas appropriate for community development. Not quite sure if you want a resolution stating any of that, but I.
But like I said, there's the Riverwalk option, there's also creating a whole different district that kind of accommodates funding to do some of these things. The $1 trillion infrastructure bill could pull some of that in if you created a whole different cultural heritage gateway, just as you do with the other arts gateway in the Tarpon River neighborhood and the River Park promenade type of districts that the city already has and gets funding for.
I think you need a big catalyst for that, and I totally agree with you. And I think over and over and over and over about this Broward the former addiction recovery center, now glorified parking lot. And it upsets me that an acre and change are sitting there. We have a shortage of schools locally. It's a perfect site for a middle school. And if you want to see the entire tide lift, then that's a very logical way to start it. And by putting in, if you call it an arts district, that's got to focus in arts and entertainment, whatever it is, because it ties in, that will lift it. That will cause the neighborhood to rally around it. But I feel we're always addressing these very smaller initiatives because that's what we have in front of us. But it frustrates me as someone that's been in the neighborhood for 10 years. Somehow, some way, our parks, our rec have always been last. That's the way it feels.
Isn't this what the vision plans for?
Maybe, I don't know. I'm not a part of the vision plan. Yeah, I hope, but the vision plan goes or doesn't go if the master plan goes. The master plan
That's the
goes.
other way around.
No, it's not. It's the way I said it. They need
No.
funding to do it. Correct.
No.
The vision plan's been sourced, it's been funded. The master plan is TBD based on funding.
Right.
The problem is you have a county sitting there not paying anything on this literally glorified parking lot. The police station is finished. It's soon to be completed. They're probably in a punch out phase.
Right.
Why can't they talk about what's next? Why is it always opaque? Why is it always vague with them? Why is there always a story on what's happening with that site? Have you heard, Tricia, have you heard anything about that site? Why, who can we speak to at the county to understand what their plan is for that? Because that could be the catalyst for the neighborhood.
You told us they wanted to put the portable bathroom.
But that's kind of aged, hasn't it? Like that, we haven't heard that in a long time. It's been over a
That's
year.
because it's a party.
No, I understand
You
that.
have to get, you want the right, folks are watching right there.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
Maggie, please come
sorry.
up. I mean, if you'd like to come up, please come up. Yeah. No, I'm just saying, I live on the same street as the parking lot. I live very close by the police station. It's a frustrating position to be in when it feels like it's the only neighborhood that seems to just kind of not get recognized in a way where there's other neighborhoods that do get recognized. And I'll be the first to say it. I go to parks outside of my neighborhood because they're better parks. They just are. They're more user-friendly for my family. They're more user-friendly for kids. We don't have a playground in Silver Bend. We don't. We literally do not. We have a fire station. It's beautiful. Doesn't serve a lot of utility for children outside, you know,
Right.
of the novelty of having like the old fire trucks. Why hasn't there been recreational equipment installed on the river where the seawall is broken? Why is the seawall still broken? You know, it sort of intersects to that again, but it'd be great to have this big piece answered so that maybe the little pieces around it sort of get addressed.
It's kind of the point, it's like, this is the historic district or the oldest part of the city, and yet there isn't any funding. And Richard's point is like, it's one of the last communities to get the funding. There is no kids area in these parks to play. There are no food stores. It's kind of like nothing at all in the neighborhood. There's plenty of things that, as we're pointing
Could be,
out,
yeah.
that are
So-
issues that are not even considered or incorporated with further planning for this area of the city.
Aren't these issues that would best be raised to the commission by the neighborhood association? Who would have more clout?
Historic preservation works, if you're gonna
No,
preserve the neighborhood.
not-
you
we
kinda
can't do
have to.
anything. We can't do anything. Maggie?
Discuss taxes on the finance as a funding mechanism.
Tell that to the commission.
Well, it's just,
Yeah.
it's a way of creating a district, you need a redevelopment plan. And then you, create a tax increment finance district where any new development that comes in, the incremental property tax would get used to instead repay a bond that you could
Right.
issue at the front end. And the incremental property tax, and depending on which jurisdictions participate, county, school board, city, it could be significant, and then you could get millions of dollars on the front end. And then that property tax, the incremental property tax pays off the bond.
Right, but that's creating like a cultural heritage gateway that would create that district. You could do those kind of financing bonds, and that's what I'm suggesting to consider or to explore. And that's why we're having this conversation. What can we do as a board to help?
Just look at.
Preserve
tax
these
increment
areas in the
finances,
city.
because Atlanta did a fantastic job with it, and they created the Beltline, which is a 22-mile
Right.
Trails to Trails project. Worldwide recognized, and they use tax increment finance.
And where do you go
Also a
to,
lot of grants. They use a lot of grants.
Mhm.
where do you
Yeah.
go to get insider information for that to happen?
So I'm gonna interrupt us because we're losing our majority, which is
I'm not
fine,
leaving, I'm just.
but, I think we should wrap this up.
I just want to say real quickly, for the things like the playground, this is all the things that the neighborhood's trying to address, and we don't
Right.
want to compete with you guys, so maybe we need to.
We have competition, Maggie, there really isn't.
Yeah, but I don't
Right,
think,
so I'm just saying, to put this stuff forward somewhere, just as long as it goes to the consulting firm, but. Let's just do it with the master plan.
That should be
If
the-
that
yeah.
fails, then, we can come back to trying.
and I go back to my point, that should really be part of the master plan, the vision plan, the communications that everybody gives to the people doing the plan. And it's good for us to hear it, but I don't think we have any power to do anything.
But to give the idea to the consulting firm, and then when the master plan time comes, because we're gonna be aggressive about this, we're not letting it slide.
No, I understand that, yeah.
So I don't, almost guarantee. Whatever, but I totally agree with you, Richard, we're last.
It's been that way, and I thought it would move at some point. It hasn't moved. And I am not gonna let go on the county piece. That's the biggest piece left. And to Sonia's point, you could do a charter school with a revenue bond and it would activate everything, but it's like, why is this not why is it always tabled?
Has anybody gone to the county?
No, because the county's always just kind of, oh, we're gonna, obviously now it's been used as a parking lot for whatever, 2 years. Okay, that's wrapping up. Now what? What's their vision plan? What are they gonna do with this site? It's been sitting there, So it
But
just,
there's plenty of other property that's in the sample bin district that is just sitting there too vacant.
Correct.
lots and-
I just think as a major catalyst, a major project would be awesome. And then it's like, it will naturally occur from there. I think the small stuff, it just sort of like, it drips, right? But we need to fill the bucket up and dump it over and just let it kind of dominate. And it's not doing that because Virginia Schumann Young, the neighborhood has come around that. The same function can occur here, the same the radius effect can occur, but it's got no chance because it's an empty lot. And as far as I'm concerned, it's gonna be liability once there's no more cars parking.
But does the neighborhood as a whole stand behind you and are they willing to lobby? I don't understand.
Arthur, I
why
stopped
the
going to the Civic
neighborhood can't do
Association
that.
when I joined this board because I felt in my own way that there was a conflict of interest.
Okay.
So I don't
Okay,
know.
I
I can't speak
understand.
to it personally. Maggie's been here in a de facto way,
Right,
speaking
I
on what
yeah,
she's heard in the meetings. All I'm getting at is you need the domino to fall because it's been sitting stacked up for way too long.
And you guys are the first domino.
There is no services, there's no.
There's
schools,
nothing.
There's no stores, there's like none of these things in the community.
You guys
So
are the
that's-
first domino to really bring this to the city commission's attention, to the county's
But look,
attention.
Arthur, when Lennar came in and did the plan unit development, logically you would have an amenity. There's no amenities. There's no playground. There's nothing that incorporates. There's literally not a
So who
playground.
was watching over them?
I wasn't part of
I'm
that.
just
There's a
saying-
developer
I'm
agreement at
just
some
saying,
point.
know.
There's a lot of green space. It's a glorified schoolhouse that has no function anymore. We used to meet in there as a
Okay.
civic association. That was 10 years ago. For whatever reason, that building I think is all but condemned.
That's a question. Have you
So-
heard anything further about the West Side Schoolhouse? There was rumors that it was being purchased.
Yeah, I mean, it is being explored,
Yeah,
purchased, but
for private.
Nothing.
I don't know the exact status.
Okay. I mean, it just seems it's ready to hit something bigger than a single,
And I hear your frustration,
That's
but
it.
I don't know what we can do about it.
But that land around the school, I understand, the HUD actually owns it, so they maintain that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to unfortunately leave,
no, it's okay.
so.
I'll make a
I'll leave
motion
you.
to adjourn.